Hey, it's Tim.
And it's Amy from GoWithLess. We're so glad you're here with us today. In this week's video, we're talking money. Specifically, we are answering viewer questions, the most common and most frequent viewer questions we have had over the past 3 years on our channel about money and really our money. So I hope you'll stay tuned for the whole video.
Every Wednesday here on our channel, we come out with a new video, typically talking about our early retirement or our nomadic lifestyle. In 2015, we left our careers in our late 40s and retired early. And in January of 2020, we sold our home and became full-time nomads.
As Tim said, we retired in 2015. Me in April, Tim in November. So we really hit our stride in January of 2016 being retired. That means we have over 5 years under our belt of a retired early kind of a lifestyle. We haven't worked anything significant since. So what we're talking about, we kind of have a lot of experience in this regard. This is not like we're brand new at it.
Yeah, exactly. And so we haven't had any income of substance, and Amy briefly touched on this, but so in the course of those years, if we did have some income, including like our YouTube income, it's been less than $5,000
a year.
So, and many times much less than $5,000. So we don't have any income that I think a lot of people who talk about money on the internet, their blog or their vlog generates a lot of income. That is not the case for us.
Talk about retirement.
Talk about retirement. That's exactly right. We are legitimately retired, or at least as we see it. So also we want to discuss some disclosures, I guess is the right word to use before we sort of get going with this conversation. We are only talking about our story, how we've invested our money, what we've done with our money. This isn't coaching or guidance or anything that we would suggest that you necessarily do. This is just simply our story. And so when it comes to talking about numbers, we just like to put out there that this is simply our story. This is not any guidance we're hoping to give you about what you might want to do with your money.
And I think that's why it's taken us 3 years to do this kind of a video, even though we've had the questions, because we feel we're not experts in, we're not financial planners, we're not financial people in any way. All we are experts in is our own lives. And that's been going really well, but maybe that's even dumb luck to some degree. Yeah. So that's part of why our hesitation. So we urge you to go to a financial planner for really specific questions, because and like we aren't tax professionals, accounting professionals, any of it.
When we actually launched our plan, we had done a ton of research on the internet, probably like you're potentially doing now, and sort of figured out what we thought the math needed to be, and then we took these numbers to someone who we trusted, who was a professional, and said, hey, do you think our plan as we've got it laid out will work? And so
she said yes.
She said yes.
She said yes, and we've been off ever since. So the first thing we're going to dive into is not even a question, but it's something that comes up over and over and over again. We talk about every month our target spending of $36,000. Now there's an assumption that because we have $36,000 as our target, that is what we can spend. And in years that we go a little over, for example, we went to about $40,000 this past year, people will kind of pile on and say, see, your plan is failing. This doesn't work. You're going to go back to work. You're going to be bankrupt. Like they kind of pile on. It's not a lot of people, because it's really just a very small handful, and most are very supportive. However, there's this assumption. Why? What's the discrepancy, Tim?
So the discrepancy is that we like to have a margin in our life. We've talked about this in many facets of our life. We like to have this room for if things go wrong, then we want to have some margin for error, basically. And so when we actually launched our plan in I guess 2016, if you will, that's when we actually set our number firmly. Or 2015 is when we actually set the number firmly, right?
Yes.
And so we had a certain amount of money, and we decided that we were going to utilize the 3.5% withdrawal rate. That's our safe withdrawal rate. So we basically said, from this point forward, how much ever money we have, we're going to multiply that times 3.5%, and that's going to be the number we're going to have this year. We apply a 2% annual cost of living adjustment, so basically that's to account for inflation. And that is our safe withdrawal rate number that we basically take out every year. And what I mean by take out every year is we set that aside in a separate account, and that number well exceeds the $36,000 that we have to spend. And what that provides us with is, again, just a margin of safety that if one year we decide we're going to buy a car, we can go buy it in cash, and it could come out of this safe withdrawal rate number, and we're going to feel comfortable with that. We're not going to have to worry. And so spending $36K is just again, something that we came up with. I often say, what's the word I often use?
It's not indicative of anything. I don't know that
anything.
Anyone knows what Tim's
so
talking about.
When I say it's not indicative of anything, it's just a number that we liked. It's $3,000 a month. It's a nice round number. It works for us.
It makes
our
us
life
happy.
functions. It
Yeah,
makes us happy.
our life is great.
So this number but it's not necessarily our safe withdrawal rate. And the reason we wouldn't actually, I don't think we even, no matter what it was, we wouldn't feel comfortable spending up to the maximum of that. We like the idea of having this margin of safety. I think 3.5% also, when it comes to a safe withdrawal rate, there's plenty of debate on the internet about, especially when you retire early, that number might even need to be lower, or some people are now saying that number could be higher. This is just simply a number that we settled on, 3.5%, that we feel comfortable withdrawing from our savings on an annual basis, and it works for us.
And we are nothing if not adaptable. So if that wasn't working for us, we would adapt. We still have an enormous amount of fat in our budget at the $40,000 that we're spending. There's still a lot of fat that we put it. We gave more than 10% to charity last year at the end of the year. Now, when Tim talks about us having this fund where we put our, what we do is every single January, we put the money in the beginning of January, and that is our fund for the year. And because we haven't spent it yet the whole year, we do have, it's increasing here. And it's for things, as I think you mentioned, maybe we need a new car, potentially, hopefully we're able to get out of the country at some point and do not need that. But really, like, we have extremely high healthcare deductibles. I think it's about $6,000 plus each. So if we needed to have our healthcare deductible met, just stuff that we don't anticipate. So that is why, and it's funny because people just assume that what you have is what you spend. If you have an income, you spend that entire income. No, we are all about the buffer.
100%.
Okay, legitimate question. Where do you invest in? Where is your money?
Yeah, so first we're going to say what we don't invest in before we talk about what we do invest in. So number one, we don't buy individual stocks, we don't buy individual bonds, we don't have annuities. Our money is basically in two asset classes. It's in stocks and it is in bonds, and cash. I'm going to say three asset classes, I guess. And so when it comes to stocks, what we mean by stocks is we are big proponents of low-cost index funds, and so we really like total market funds. We also we have a diversified set of funds that fit this index model, and we'll talk about how that's actually, what the percentages are as we delve into this further. But low-cost index funds are where we're primarily invested. That's true of bonds as well. We actually have bond funds that are low-cost indexed bond funds, and so those are the two places where we are primarily invested.
Very low-cost funds.
Very low-cost funds, and so these are things, if you go on the internet, things like Vanguard, VTI, VTSAX, these sorts of things. BND. But that we have a wider swath of investments that we make, but everything that we own from an asset standpoint is in some sort of an indexed fund. Another question that we are frequently asked is, was real estate a part of your FIRE strategy?
We have an entire video about how we are FIRE weirdos. I'll put it up here. And one of the ways is that we are not real estate investors. So many of our friends have done very, very well with real estate. That is not us, though. Most of our money has come from earning it and compound interest. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the only real estate that we've had. Back in 2008, we had our home. We were moving, and it was a really, really bad time to be selling. So in 2008, instead of selling, we turned it into a rental. And for 7 years, we had a renter live there. And then, in fact, we ended up moving back into that in 2015 when we retired, and we just sold that property in 2020. That means we don't have a single piece of real estate, and the only other real estate we've ever owned has been our primary residence. So real estate was not part of us. I mean, it's nominal to say the least.
And I would say we are not opposed to real estate in any way. We think it has a phenomenal potential to be great for a lot of people. It's just not our path. That's right.
Our next question is a bit more involved, so we're going to be using some slides. And that is, where is your money invested? How is it allocated?
So the first thing I'm going to discuss is the money that we don't currently touch, the money that's just sitting there waiting for us at some point down the road when we might need it. And so this is going to be all of our tax-deferred assets. This is going to be our 401ks, which have actually been put into IRAs, so it's IRAs, our Roth IRAs, our HSA, our individual or solo 401k. So all of these tax-deferred assets that if we were to go get that money today, we'd be penalized or we'd have to jump through some hoop to actually have access to that money. And so there are lots of ways to access this money early. We don't know a lot of the details about that because we don't have any intention to use it. And so we don't need to have access to this money, so we haven't spent a lot of time digging into it. So a lot of time on our channel we'll get comments about, do you know about this or that? And the answer is going to be no, because we don't need that money yet. If we were to have some requirement to access this money, we would certainly be investigating these things, but we don't need it. And so for right now, we don't have answers about that. But all of that money is in the process of being it rolled into 100% stock. So the idea is that we may not need this money for 20 years. And so there's this saying about sort of market. So it's time in the market is important versus timing the market. And so we're not timing the market. This money is just sitting there in stocks, and we're hoping that in 20 or 30 years, it has a return that's going to have served us well. So that is the money that's just sort of set aside, waiting for some point in the future. So now we're going to talk about the money that we are currently spending. So the money that we're currently spending, we have in 3 different asset classes. It's going to be stocks at about 60%, and then we're going to have bonds at about 30%, and cash at about 10%. And so that represents the makeup of where our money is currently invested. And that 40% that we're going to call safe-ish or safer money, because bonds, obviously there's risk associated with being in bonds. It's safer certainly than the stock market, but there's still some risk. That represents about 6 years of our SWR number, that 3.5% that we talked about earlier, where we actually make these set-asides every year. So if things were to go bad in the stock market, we have about 6 years worth of money that we have access to easily to cover us until the market hopefully would recover.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the money that is in that second slide account, the money that we've already paid taxes on. For 5 years, as we were leading up to fire, we took every single penny of my income after we'd already paid taxes on it and invested that. We have been saving throughout our entire lives. All of the money is in this account. So things that weren't in the 401k kind of thing with our employers went into this bucket. So it is well funded and it should last us for a long time.
Yep, so for many, many years of my career, I actually maxed out my 401k and then put additional money into savings. And then like Amy said, whenever Amy went back to work when we were married, not only did she put as much money as she could into her 401k at work, but also every penny that she earned, we set aside for this early retirement plan. So the next question that we are frequently asked is, what about Social Security?
That is an excellent question, but it is a bit premature. I'm 52 and Tim is 53. Back about 5+ years ago, when we were really getting into our FIRE plan, Tim bought a tool, maybe spent about $100 on that tool, that taught about when to optimize your Social Security and give all kinds of formulas and things like that. And 18 months later, it was completely obsolete because the laws had changed. So what we realized is we don't need to be spending a lot of time on our Social Security right now because it is way premature. Now, when we're about 60, we're probably going to dig really, really, really deep. If we still have a YouTube channel, I'm sure we're going to be talking about it somewhere on YouTube. But we are expecting to be using Social Security. We are expecting something to be there. We've been paying into it for decades. So we don't know what it will look like. We don't know how it will factor into our plan, but it's very likely that it could be part of our health care as a possibility, our long-term care. Who knows? Maybe we end up renting a home and need to pay rent. And certainly that would come in very handy.
Exactly. We just may inflate our lifestyle to support this extra cash that happens.
Maybe we'll need it.
Or maybe we'll need it to support our healthcare. Who knows what's going to happen with healthcare? That's certainly a possibility.
A frequent question we get is, how much money do you have, or what's your net worth?
Yep. So this isn't a number that we share. We have no intentions of sharing it. This isn't something that you'll ever see on our channel. And I think part of the reason for that is we just don't think it's relevant to the conversation that we're having. The most important thing in terms of figuring out what your retirement strategy might be is going to be your spending. And so we discuss that because we think it's relevant to anybody's retirement strategy. It's kind of interesting, we believe, to share what it looks like for us to see if this is something that might work for you, but how much money we specifically have is really irrelevant to overall what we share on our channel. Also, we feel like we share a ton on our channel. We've actually heard from a viewer, I don't know if it's a frequent viewer, I don't think it is, but somebody who said, I'm not going to watch your channel if you don't share this information with us. So I guess that is what it is.
Actually, we had another viewer we met up with last month. He said, I know exactly how much you spend on your bras, a dude. So we are already sharing so much. And when Tim says there's the only reason we don't share it is because it's not relevant, that is a reason we don't share it, but also we get to have a private life. And so this isn't something that we feel comfortable about sharing, and it isn't necessary for you to have a fire life what we have. It really is based upon the spending in the end. As long as you have enough, and you can use that by the 3.5% rule, the 4% rule. As long as you have enough, it really can be just based upon your spending. And that's why we're called Go With Less, because it's really about examining your spending. And I think, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so what we want to know from our audience this week is really about your drawdown strategy. Are you comfortable sharing your net worth? I'm curious, do you talk with people about your net worth? Your people in your family, people, your children, people in your lives, your coworkers, the public internet. So I know that some do. We don't feel comfortable. I think everyone is at their different level. So curious if you share that, what your feelings personally are, and if you would divulge to the world, and also what your withdrawal strategy is. Do you have money in different buckets? Are you funded before you can tap into those deferred assets? So we want to hear what that's all about. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Adios.